Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Mexican Grand Prix weekend stream from the Super License team. Tonight, that team looks like this. That team is this guy. I'm Rodney, your humble host. This evening we'll be looking at a couple of things that have been kicking around in the old F1 news sphere. Tonight I am your news broadcaster. I'm your anchorman for the evening. Whatever appears on my screen, I will read it. Just like in that documentary, also called Anchorman. Anchorman? Imagine a documentary called Anchorman. What would that be about? The man with the biggest ankles in the world you've ever seen. And he's amazing at high jump. There's lots of news stories to catch up on, so we're going to have a look through the biggest news stories, the juiciest news stories, and some difficult news stories, but important things that we should talk about. If you're interested, you can always support everything the Super License does through Patreon by chipping in a couple of dollars. If you listen to the podcast, you get the podcast early. We're thinking about putting the podcast out in video form. Maybe we just slip you the video early. Maybe people listening to the podcast get to listen to it. You get to watch it. Maybe there's bonus stuff that only you want. Maybe there's bonus episodes of the podcast that are out there now that you could go and listen to that no one's ever heard other than the Patreons. And there's also, from time to time, special videos that go out just for patrons. So we appreciate everyone who supports us on Patreon. And if you think that might be you, if you think you want that in your life, well, all I can say to you is,
Lewis, I love you and respect you.
Except instead of Lewis, it's you. If you're interested in following us online, you can find us on the Reds at Superlicense F1, and our website is superlicense.fm. And as always, the FM stands for Formula Men, or at least tonight it does. Time to get into some stuff. So what does that look like for this evening? Well, there was one big news story from the last week that set tongues wagging. If I could get my screen thing working, this would be really good. So let's bring it up and we'll get stuck straight into it. You have to have been particularly distracted to have not noticed what happened after the US Grand Prix last week, which is to say that Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc were disqualified for a technical violation where their car was found to not meet the regulations because the plank that sits on the bottom of the floor had worn away to a degree that made the car illegal. Usually this is something that happens when the car sits too low. Usually pushing the car down too low is a way to try to get the car to go faster, but there are limits on what you can do. They tested 4 cars. They tested one Red Bull car, one Mercedes car, one McLaren car, and who was the other one? One of the, I think, who am I missing? Aston Martin? Anyway, the long and short of it was Max Verstappen's cleared. Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc were found to be in breach of the regulations and they were disqualified. The other driver was Lando Norris, I believe, from McLaren, who also passed. So a big price to pay for a very, very small problem. Here's some reactions and here's some thoughts that I have about the whole situation. This is from Autosport. Hamilton, F1 cars without plank checks got away with it in United States Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton says several sources told him other Formula One cars in the United States Grand Prix had illegal planks, but they got away with it because they weren't tested. The FIA only measures the plank on 4 cars after the race, and they found that those of Hamilton and Charles Leclerc were illegal, leading to the disqualification of the 2 drivers. Despite the 50% failure rate on the bumpy Kota track, the FIA stuck with its usual protocols and opted not to sample other cars and any other cars from further down the grid. Speaking for the first time after the disqualification, Hamilton made clear how frustrated he was to lose second place. I want to say, first off, there's nothing wrong with Hamilton being disappointed with losing second place. He drove an incredible race. I think the narrative that he was going to catch and beat Verstappen in that race was probably way overhyped, but that doesn't mean he can't be disappointed, and that doesn't mean the fans can't be disappointed. But anyway, this was Hamilton's reaction. I just came out of the press conference. I got back and I was about to get in the ice tub, he said. And then Toto Wolff came running down and told me, obviously, I was devastated as it had been such a great day and a great race. But yeah, and then I didn't find out fully until I was back home. Yeah, a bit deflated after the day. There were lots of positives to take from it. Asked what he thought about only 4 cars being tested. Hamilton made his feelings clear. First, I've heard from several different sources that there were lots of other cars that were also illegal, he said, but they weren't tested, so they got away with it. I've been racing here 16 years. There's been times when there's been many other scenarios like this, where some people got away with certain things and some people have just been unlucky they got tested. So I think ultimately there probably needs to be some sort of better structure in terms of making sure it's fair and even across the board. So the clear suggestion there is that what the FAA did was unfair and unreasonable. Which, would I agree with that? Not necessarily. You could say it's a little bit like being caught speeding or being caught drink driving. You know, it's unlucky to be caught, but at the same time, it's your responsibility to obey the rules. So it's not a question of when you get caught doing the wrong thing, well, why don't they go out there and catch everybody doing the wrong thing? It's not about that, as we'll see. Let's pull up the next story. So this happened after, well, around the same time as Hamilton's comments, but after a lot of, I would say, social media backlash, especially from Team LH and their associated members, people saying it's ridiculous. And Martin Brundles was one who led his voice to this narrative. It's ridiculous that they tested 4 cars and 2 were found to be illegal. Therefore, every single car on the grid should have been tested. Now, if you're a Lewis Hamilton fan, I can understand you being disappointed that he got disqualified. What I can't understand is the reasoning of, well, 50% of the cars were illegal, therefore you should have tested every single car on the grid. That makes absolutely no sense. And when you try and point this out to people, they get very mad, as I found out, in the typical fashion that I do, ruffling feathers on social media. But here we go. This is from the people at crash.net. This is the FIA's reasoning and justification for their actions and their approach and methodology to how they test cars. FIA jumped to defend random checks after questioning over Lewis Hamilton disqualification. Ooh, look at this. This is like Back to the Future style, where, like, you know, Lewis Hamilton, he's just being completely, like, disqualified out of existence. The FIA have opened up about their process, which led to Lewis Hamilton's disqualification from the United States Grand Prix. You also notice all the media. I mean, Charles Leclerc also got disqualified. But all the talk is Lewis Hamilton got disqualified. The Mercedes driver impressed with the podium finish, but he and Ferrari Charles Leclerc were later DQ'd. That's industry talk for disqualified by the FIA after their post-race checks uncovered excessive plank wear underneath their cars. Is there anything interesting here? Blah, 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 blah. That led Sky's Martin Brundle to question if a 50% compliance rate was worthy of the FIA reconsidering how they conduct checks. The FIA have jumped to clarify how and why the process works, which resulted in Hamilton and Leclerc's disqualification. The answer is that a series of random checks are carried out every weekend on different areas of the cars, and FIA statement explained. This process has been in place for many decades and exists to ensure compliance with the regulations by virtue of the fact that the teams do not know before the race which specific areas of which cars might be examined beyond the standard checks carried out on every car each weekend, such as the fuel sample being taken from all cars after each Grand Prix. This means that, from their perspective, any part of the car could be checked at any time, and the consequences for non-compliance with the technical regulations can be severe. So what the FAA are trying to say here is there's a heap of technical regulations about how these cars have to be built and set up. And it wasn't covered in that story, but in another story I read that the FAA said, look, we literally just do not have the resources to check every single car, every single race. It's completely impossible. It's completely implausible. Here's what we can do. And this helps us maximize the effort that we can put in. This maximizes our capacity while ensuring, in theory, maximum compliance. Random spot checks for random things at random races. And your car could be checked for anything at any time and you don't know. That creates an incentive to obey the rules and be compliant as much as possible. That's just it. So when people say, why did they only check 4 cars? That's exactly why. Why didn't they expand the search when they found that 50% of them were illegal? Well, it wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered if all of them were illegal. They were all randomly checked. They were all in breach of the regulations and they were all disqualified. Now, a lot from some people was made of the fact that it was apparently 0.05 of a millimeter that they were, beyond the compliance in terms of the plank wear. But it doesn't matter. That's not the point. The plank could have been worn away to literally like just a little nub. It could have been, 1/1000th of a millimeter. The rules are the rules. That's just all there is to it. Lewis Hamilton made a big fuss about saying, the plank wearing down that much and us having the right head of our car set to where it was set wouldn't have made any difference in terms of performance. I think he can say that in terms of, within the context of the gains that Mercedes have made, that's completely fine. He can say that all he wants. I don't think it's fair or correct to say that in terms of the way the FIA administer their checks. One criticism that was thrown out there was maybe, as I said, maybe the performance from Mercedes was rooted in the fact that they had lowered their car. So in other words, maybe in an effort to try and get some performance out of the car, they lowered their car too far. That resulted in wear of the plank. And that was why they were pinged. And the solution then would have been, well, raise the ride height of the car and then, you'll be a little bit slower, but you won't get disqualified. Isn't that better? That's fair. Martin Brundle was one of the people putting his name out there and saying, I think it's because they ran the car a bit too low. The solution is that they probably should have just raised the car a little bit. The problem with that is you're not really racing at that point. And I think sharing that mentality is Mr. Toto Wolff, who I think had some interesting thoughts on the matter, saying, no regrets for Toto Wolff. After Austin, Mercedes would do the same again despite disqualification. Here he is, pondering life as a disqualified team. Mercedes boss Toto Wolff doesn't regret how his team handled last weekend's United States Grand Prix after Lewis Hamilton was disqualified for a technical infringement. Hamilton lost his P2, we know. The 7-time world champion wasn't the only driver excluded. Speaking to Sky Sports during the Mexico City Grand Prix weekend, Wolff made it clear that Mercedes would do the same again. I don't believe that that's true. I think they will do something slightly different to the tune of about 0.06 of a millimeter. But alas, he says, I would take the same thing, and I would also take the disqualification because we got it wrong. I take the disqualification running for a race win and see the performance against running P3 and ending 25 seconds adrift. Essentially, every day of the week I would go for the disqualification. Essentially what he's trying to say is I would rather we take risks and push the envelope and try and get performance, try and race for a race win and risk a disqualification than just settle for being, 30 seconds slower, finishing third or off the podium. He'd rather push. A little bit was made about the fact that Mercedes have been tested more times than, say, Red Bull, but Ferrari and Mercedes have been tested the same number of times. And also a lot of the front-running teams have been tested for plank wear more frequently than the teams further down the grid. Now, I have to say, I believe that if we check previous years, how many things have been checked and on which cars, the front running cars would have been tested a lot more. There's good reason for this. It's important to be sure that the front running cars are in the biggest compliance with the regulations. Why is that? Well, here's why you don't go and check AlphaTauri or Williams or whoever's the back marker of the day. That's why you don't check everything on their car all the time, is because if their car gets disqualified and they're running last and they're last in the championship, the stakes are lower than if you're Mercedes and McLaren and Aston Martin and whoever else and Ferrari fighting it out for potentially tens of millions of dollars in the championship, and there's all kinds of money on the line. It's not so much that you wouldn't want to check them. It's not about assuming that they're illegal or assuming that they're not illegal. It's about like having something to point to say, no, we've checked the front running cars more often than the back market cars because it's so important that the front running cars are compliant. And not only that, but that we check them all. And a little bit was made out of the whole idea of like, well, they say it's random, but how could it be random if Ferrari and Mercedes have been checked the same number of times and they've been checked for plank wear more often than other teams? Well, here's why it could be random. It could be random because they check the other teams for other things. It also could be random in the sense that it doesn't have to, random doesn't have to mean which teams are selected. Random can mean when they're selected. Random can mean which part is selected. That's the whole point. I mean, the whole point is not so much who, where, when, and what. It's that. The point is that they get checked and that you don't actually know, that the team doesn't know what's going to be checked on any given day. Why would you need for the team to not know what you're going to check on a given day? Well, because if you're going to check their plank wear that day and they know that, they're going to make sure the plank wear is fine, aren't they? You know what I mean? It's really very simple. So there were some bad takes out there. Lewis Hamilton, I think, was sniffing around this idea of this isn't fair. The FIA should do things differently. Others got away with it. This sort of language of like minimizing his wrongdoing. Charles Leclerc, I have to say, did a lot better in the things that he was saying. He was saying we got it wrong and we paid the price and it's our fault. It's our mistake to correct. Toto Wolff went some way to saying the same thing. Saw this good take and I wanted to finish on this. Charles Leclerc handled the Austin disqualification appropriately while Lewis Hamilton, trying to save face, claims Danica Patrick. Danica Patrick for Sky and Lewis Hamilton. Danica Patrick feels Lewis Hamilton's comments after the disqualification in Austin have been an attempt to try and save face, while Charles Leclerc handled the same situation appropriately. The Sky F1 pundit made this statement during the broadcast as the panel was discussing the impact of the lower ride height on car performance. Since the disqualification, Hamilton has made multiple statements and even passed a few claims about the legality of rivals' cars, which he's allowed to do. Just question why he would do that. He even claimed that according to his sources, multiple cars were going to fail scrutineering if that had happened. On the other hand, Charles Leclerc has been a bit more docile on the matter, accepting the penalty without much of a reaction. Let's just get down to what she said. I think Charles probably handled it appropriately because there's nothing you can really do about making a change at this point of time. You were illegal and you're out of the race. It felt like Lewis was trying to sort of build a case and save a little bit of face on it. But at the end of the day, he said, it doesn't make a difference, but it does. Danica Patrick there just pointing out that, yes, of course, your car has to be legal. And as much as Lewis says, go on, let us break the rules a little bit. She's just reminding everybody, it just doesn't work like that. Look, I mean, we all have, a lot of us are fans of a driver or a team or something. It's okay to be a fan. It's okay to even say, it sucks that Lewis got disqualified. This is a bad sporting outcome for fans. You can say all of that. That's all completely valid. You could also even say, as a Lewis Hamilton fan, it's an absolute shame that he got disqualified because he drove so well. he was so close to winning. Lewis really needed it. British fans really needed it. The sport really needed it. That's all valid. It's just not valid though, because I've seen some takes like this. The FIA got it wrong. The FIA is out to get Lewis. The FIA should change how they do things. The FIA doesn't have to change nothing. What the FIA are doing is completely fine. People who have to change are those who are setting up the car. They need to do it differently and make it legal. So there's that. What else have we got? This is controversy adjacent. And it sort of ties in with some of the things that we have been talking about recently regarding Max Verstappen being investigated for impeding during qualifying. Well, yesterday we got this. Not that as much as this. This is from the good people at Race Fans. Hamilton, Verstappen, Alonso, and Russell avoid penalties after investigations. Now, if you saw this during qualifying yesterday in in Mexico, sorry. If you saw this during qualifying in Mexico yesterday, there was multiple instances of drivers stopped or going incredibly slowly at the end of the pit lane. And there was a bank of cars queuing up behind them trying to get out. So these drivers were investigated. Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, George Russell have all been cleared of wrongdoing after investigations following qualifying. Three of the drivers' left. Verstappen, Alonso, and Russell were all investigated by the stewards for impeding rivals at the end of the pit exit in the final minutes of the first phase of qualifying. Now, qualifying 1, remember, this is the one where all 20 cars are on track at the same time. The pit lane impeding incidents occurred during the end of Q1, with 4 minutes remaining. Just 3 cars were circulating the track with 17 cars in the pit lane. The field began to leave the pits. Yuki Tsunoda, the first driver out, followed by Sergio Perez and Kevin Magnussen. Behind Magnussen, Verstappen slowed to a crawl to build a gap to the Haas ahead, which was exiting the pit lane slowly. Verstappen crossed the white pit line exit at around 10 kilometers per hour and continued to drive slowly, but without stopping, until he eventually picked up speed around 14 seconds later. Once Verstappen was departed, Lance Stroll and Nico Hülkenberg left the pits together behind the Red Bull. Alonso was next in the queue and was advised to make a gap at pit exit. He began to build a gap to Hülkenberg, stopping at the white line before eventually exiting the pits at a slower rate than Verstappen have, unbelievably. So he must have been in single digits. All the while, the Carlos Sainz Jr.'s Ferrari directly behind him. Now, this was asked during the post-qualifying interviews to say, hey, what's the deal here? Why are you guys impeding everyone at the end of the pit lane? And Verstappen made it very clear. It's because of this new rule where you actually have a minimum lap time that you have to do. So if you're on track and there's a car ahead of you, you can't slow down to pull out a gap. The only way for us to have a gap, and you need, they say, between 6 and 8 seconds to avoid the car in front of you disturbing your aerodynamics in your wake, you need 6 seconds. So if you come out and there's a car less than 6 seconds ahead of you, you can't slow down because of the minimum lap time rule. The only way for us to build a gap is in the pit lane. So we come out, we see where the other cars are at, and if we have to slow down or stop, we do. Because this is their argument, and this is why they escaped penalty. They made that rationalization, and they said, it's safer for us to do that than it is for us to impede someone. The only way for us to safely build a gap, which is what we need, is to do it in the pit lane, to drive slowly or stop. So they all got off, but we've created this mess. This whole minimum lap time rule was introduced, supposedly, to stop impeding and to reduce impeding. And we would see at certain tracks, there would be sometimes 10, 12, 15 cars all slowing each other down because nobody wanted to be first. They all wanted to sort of get the best track position. They all wanted to have that whole punch through the air ahead of them and follow someone else through and get a tow or whatever. And everyone was sick of that. So the FIA introduced this rule, minimum lap times. That will solve the day. This is going to stop everybody from bunching up like that. You're going to have to set a minimum lap time. So there'll be no going slow. There'll be no slowing down and slowing down cars behind you or getting in the way. We've seen other drivers too. I can think of Carlos Sainz taking pole somewhere and then being investigated for going slower than the minimum lap time, and he said, "I did that so that I didn't impede anybody." So what are you going to do? Like, I either impede somebody or I go slow. Which one do you want me to do? But there's this new phenomenon now, and it's a problem that the FA has caused for themselves. You know, to avoid bunching up the pack on the grid, people have started bunching up the pack in the pit lane. So it's stupid. I'm sick of it, and it's got to go. Get rid of it. This is not a popular take at all, but my solution to all of these problems is to go back to the single hot lap qualifying that we used to have 20 years ago. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it's riveting television necessarily, but we don't have any of these problems. Go back to the single hot laps, I say. What does Max Verstappen say?
Mate, where's the toilet paper?
Oh, I forgot he doesn't care. He's going to set pole anyway. He didn't this weekend. Ferrari locked out the front row, but still. I mean, my question is, what does Lando Norris think of that, and is he excited?
I'm getting a hard-on in the middle of the race.
All right, well, asked and answered. All right, let's get into something else. Didn't realize that was all going to take so long, but here we are. Here we are about to do something else equally long. We've seen the triumphant return of Daniel Ricciardo this week in Formula One, and it's been good to have him back, lighting up the timesheets. He's also been the focus of some news for the wrong reasons. A lot of it stems from an appearance on a little video that he guested on to promote something. Who cares? Doesn't matter what it was for. Let's have a listen to the video, and then we'll react.
I think women are good drivers.
Good is subjective, but yes.
Yes, you do. It's offensive, isn't it? The stereotype that women are not good drivers, it's hurtful.
Yeah.
Because you look at the stats, if you look at the facts, please.
Yeah, I'm listening.
In the history of Formula One, tell me the number of accidents on the racetrack that have been caused by female drivers.
Probably none.
Why is that?
There has been little to no female F1 drivers.
Why is that?
Because there's 20 of us in the world.
We were going to surprise you today with a female driver.
Oh, really?
She had an accident. She's okay though, she's fine. But she just couldn't make it.
Hilarious stuff. Just hilarious. So, this is obviously like a bit of a comedy interview, and the whole point, I guess, was to make Daniel uncomfortable, which gets him laughing and smiling. The criticism and the blowback was, this guy's making jokes about how women are bad drivers. Why are you laughing at that? What is funny about that? What? Why? You also notice that Daniel gets asked, why aren't there any women driving in Formula One? And he says something like, there's only 20 of us. There's only 20 of us. I'll expand on that in a minute, but just remember that. And you're probably thinking, oh, Rod, this is unfair. This was a comedy video, first of all. So it was just jokes. It was just jokes. But also that's like one clip. So you've taken that out of context. Well, the problem is, after seeing that, I actually did go and try and find the whole video. I think that this is it. It's only a couple of minutes, but I actually believe this was the whole video. And there's more. It's not just the laughing at the women can't drive joke. There's also this.
Do you know a lot about cars? Like specifically about cars? Do you know anything about the transmission?
A little bit, maybe.
Can you explain it to me? What do they want?
What do they want? What? Who's they?
The trans.
Do you know about the transmission? What do they want? Who? The trans people. What the trans people want. I mean, just hilarious stuff. Just unbelievably funny stuff. So unfortunately, I feel like with Daniel, there's this flip side of the coin, because there's the side that everyone loves. There's the side of Daniel who is goofy and funny and out there and willing to take the piss out of himself and others. And then there's the flip side. Then there's the side that's like too loose, too unhinged, just a bit too much. Really just a bit too much. You know, there's people who are sort of always on, or people who are just like, they just lose themselves in themselves a bit. There's something to that. And I don't know if part of it is because Daniel was out of the sport for a while or what, but I mean, this is not exactly a new thing either, I guess. And I just don't know what people think about that. But the discourse online after that clip was going around went along the lines of, why the hell is Daniel laughing at jokes about women can't drive, etc., etc. This is part of Formula One sexist problem. Etc., etc. The woke opinion, you might say. Then there was the blowback against that. Oh my God, this guy's joking. Oh my God, you can't take a joke. Please try and get some cope. Please toughen up. So, I mean, where to from here is my question. Where to from here? This that clip that I played was from a thread, a bit of a thread on the Bad website, on the Bad Bird website, formerly the Bad Bird website, I should say. Now it's the Bad whatever website. In the replies was this clip, which I also found, and it expands on the point that Daniel made before about why there aren't women in Formula One. So I'll pull this up. Let's play this, and then I'll talk about it a bit more as well. It's just horrible stuff. I think this is in the video. I don't think we can blame Elon Musk for this one, but it says here, Ricardo talking about women in motorsport. This was a promoted post as far as I can understand. LinkedIn News, Australia, he's wearing a yes, this is Optus, for which he is an ambassador, talking about why there aren't women in motorsport, or just generally about the topic of women in motorsport. So he's coming back to this idea of there's only so many seats. So let's just listen to what he says.
Simply putting it, there's 20 drivers on the grid. So it's such a small number. And if a large percentage of that number kind of funneling in is males, then obviously it's just a percentage game. It's really starting at like the grassroots, whether it's go-karting. It's really trying to encourage women to get into it from an early age, so that therefore there is obviously larger volumes and more opportunity for them to then keep moving their way up the top and obviously do it successfully.
So this is often how the discussion goes. Why aren't there women in Formula One? Well, there's so few seats and there's so many people fighting for them. And people like me and, the woke mafia online say, well, are you sure it's not because Formula One has a sexism problem? You sure it's not run by sexists? Bunch of blokes trying to keep it all blokey. Kind of a bunch of blokes who look at women as objects for their own sexual desire rather than, potential competitors in races, people worthy of your respect and consideration. And they go, no. It's because of the funnel. It's because of the funnel. Because there's hundreds and thousands of people trying to funnel into Formula One, and they're all men. And there's not many women doing that. If there were more women doing that, that would solve the problem. Well, I just disagree. I just disagree. Number one, why would women want to get into that funnel? Well, we'll see. We'll go through some of this. Some of the recent and historical attitudes towards women that men throughout Formula One have, drivers, team organizers, sport organizers, and the media. Why would women even want to get into this sport? But number two, even if they did, Formula One still has a sexism problem, and women are seen they're barely seen as humans. They're really seen as just sexual objects, and very much the mentality. And someone described this as like 70s Playboy mentality, which is driving is for guys and the women are there to be part of the show and to be looked at. Still, when people say, are you sure it's not because of that sexism problem? People say, no, it's the funnel. All right. So I guess Formula One doesn't have a sexism problem then. Well, unfortunately for you, we're about to run through about a cajillion examples of Formula One sexism problems, starting with this clip of Sebastian Vettel, a very enlightened discussion about grid girls.
Why didn't we have any grid girls today?
No idea. You're asking the wrong person. Many congratulations.
You go there, you park behind George or Dave. I mean, what's the point?
Yeah. Why didn't we have grid girls? Why do we have grid boys today? You got to park behind George or Dave. What the hell? Why even drive in Formula One if you don't get to have a grid girl standing next to your car? That would be brilliant, wouldn't it? Someone literally said, it's great that people see women's role in Formula One as equivalent to, holding up a number, something that could have been achieved by just sticky tape and a concrete block. Another one of F1's greatest hits. This is Sergio Perez. Hopefully the captions are turned on for this, and I'll translate as we go. This coincides with Susie Wolff doing a Formula One, making an F1 appearance for the first time in 22 years. This was, I believe, for Spanish, like in Spanish for Mexican media, but Chico gets asked what he thinks about women in Formula One.
Habrá una mujer por primera vez en 22 años en la Fórmula 1. ¿Qué te parece?
Sí, Susi, un gran piloto y bueno, demostrando, ¿no?, que las mujeres también pueden estar en este mundo tan difícil y bueno, ojalá
he basically says, I wish her well.
Y le pueda ir bien. También es difícil juzgar el trabajo en una práctica. No conoce el coche, estos coches son muy difíciles de manejar.
He also says it's difficult to judge from one practice session how good she will do. She doesn't know the car. The cars are really difficult to drive. Silverstone is a tricky circuit. We can't expect great things from her. My question would be why? Why can't we expect great things from her? Why shouldn't we? Basically prejudging her ability because she's a woman.
Silverstone, un circuito complicado, entonces no esperemos grandes cosas de ella.
¿Te gustaría tener una...
She asks, would you like to have a female teammate? And admittedly, she leads him on or baits him a little bit by saying, we are really complex, because she's a female, obviously. Would you like to have a female teammate?
Compañera mujer, que somos muy complicadas.
No, imagínate donde te gana una mujer, ahí sí ya es el colmo. Entonces, mejor que se vaya a la cocina.
So he says, no, imagine that. Imagine a woman could beat you. That's the last straw. She would be better in the kitchen than with cars, says Sergio Perez. He apologized for that, and people gave him a hard time for it, and Susie Wolff insisted that people cut him some slack, that he was joking, that she didn't take it personally, but, too bad. I took it personally. Another great one here. So Sterling Moss. Women lack the mental aptitude to compete in Formula One. The mental stress, I think, would be pretty difficult for a lady. I completely disagree, says development driver Susie Wolff. So Sterling Moss says he is not surprised. There are no women drivers in Formula One. He believes they do not have the mental strength to compete. This from a fucking 83-year-old man. I think they have the strength, but I don't know if they've got the mental aptitude to race hard, wheel to wheel. The trouble is, when you're racing, it's pretty tiring, says Moss, a 16-time Formula One race winner. He just said that they have the physical strength to do it, but anyway. We had 3-hour races in those days. You need tremendous concentration. Now races are only around 1 hour and 10 minutes. Well, isn't that all the more fucking reason that women could do it? You stupid, stupid old man. This is what Susie Wolff said at the time. I completely disagree with him. It makes me cringe hearing that, she said. I've got a lot of respect for Sterling Moss and what he's achieved, but I think we're in a different generation. Well, you may well be in a different generation, but, things just have not changed very much at all. This is from earlier this year. Sky Italia suspends F1 commentators after sexist remarks on air. Matteo Bobby and David Valsecchi made remarks about women in the background during Spanish Grand Prix analysis. Two Sky Sports commentators have been suspended after a series of sexist remarks during an on-air post-race analysis of the Spanish Formula One Grand Prix on Sunday. During live television, they're on television. They know they're on television. It couldn't be more obvious, and they say this shit. Matteo Bobby and David Valsecchi, both former racing drivers and now Formula One commentators for Sky Sport, an Italian channel, made sexist comments about a woman in the background around the paddock, with Bobby referring to her as an upgrade package, inviting Valsecchi to look behind him. Valsecchi turned to look at the woman and then replied, "I know, but they told me I can't test them, so I raised my hands." The comments visibly embarrassed the Sky Sports journalist Federica Massillon, who stood alongside Valsecchi, as another journalist in the studio urged the pair to be careful. Good stuff. We must be done. Oh no, we're not done. I found this online. I didn't know about this. I covered the recent appearance of Brad Pitt at the Formula One races. My coverage included things like, what is he doing there? What's he making? What are the details? This is an account called Females at Motorsport on the bad website, x.com, calling out Joe Sayward. It's articles like these why women still have to fight day in, day out for their place in F1. This is a clip from one of Joe Sayward 5000's articles, The Big News for Females in F1, of which these days there are a large number, was that Brad Pitt was wandering around. He looks good for a 58-year-old man. Great stuff. Because that's what women would be interested in, is looking at Brad Pitt. And Brad Pitt being on the grid is good news for women. No one else. Good news for them. It goes on. Formula One bosses cranky sexism. Female drivers are a joke. Formula One boss Bernie Ecclestone broke both of these golden rules. Rule number one being, if you're the head honcho of a sport with global appeal, don't insult half of the world's population, that is women. Rule number two, if you're going to belittle women, don't do it on the day a former competitor launches a campaign empowering females to get more involved in your sport. Bernie Ecclestone broke both of those rules when he all but dismissed the possibility of female drivers taking part in a Grand Prix. Speaking to Canadian TV network TSN, the 85-year-old said women should not expect to line up on an F1 grid anytime soon because they wouldn't be taken seriously. I doubt it. If there was somebody that was capable, they wouldn't be taken seriously anyway. So they would never have a car that is capable of competing, said Ecclestone. There was a girl that was driving in GP3 for a whole season. So it's not something that hasn't happened. When asked if a woman would ever compete in the main event, he replied, "No, I don't think so." Great stuff. We're still not done. But we're going to read them all. These are just the ones I could find. Female team boss Claire Williams reveals disgraceful sexism in Formula One. Claire Williams has taken aim at accusations from within Formula One's male-dominated world that becoming a mother has contributed to her team's decline. In a powerful and candid interview ahead of the new season, the de facto boss of one of the sport's most successful teams hinted at an undercurrent of sexism in the sport. She claimed online abuse she was subjected to following Williams' worst ever season could have destroyed her. The 43-year-old assumed the day-to-day running of the team from her father. She gave birth to her first child, Nate, in October 2017. Last year, Williams did not do well. This is suggesting that, they went from doing okay to not doing very well. Then she says, as soon as you're not successful, some people put that down to the fact that I am a woman. Williams told the PA news agency, they maybe give me a rougher time because I'm a woman. I've actually had someone say to me that a lot of people in the Formula One paddock think that the team started doing badly when I fell pregnant and had a baby. How dare they, she says. There are 9 other team principals in F1, and I'm sure the majority of them have children. Would you ever level that criticism at them? Am I not allowed to have a child because I'm a woman running a Formula One team? It is a disgraceful attitude and a very 19th century attitude. I work 7 days a week, pretty much all year round. If I didn't bring Nate to a handful of races, they would have rarely seen him, but I am criticized for that. You cannot win. The fact that Williams are not doing well at the moment is not because I have a child. Unreal. Unreal stuff. Suggests that because Claire Williams is a woman and she got pregnant, that's why the team was not doing well. There won't be many more. If you're struggling through this, there isn't many more. This is from a while ago, a long time ago, 2005. F1 driver told to button lip after sexist tirade. I put this one towards the end because it was both, I think, cringe and horrific, but also, well, you'll see where it goes. A girl with big boobs would never be comfortable in the car and the mechanics wouldn't concentrate. Can you imagine strapping her in, said Jensen Button. In an extraordinary interview, Button dismissed the prospects of Danica Patrick, an American racing car driver who finished 4th in this year's Indianapolis 500, moving up to compete in Formula One on the grounds that her figure could distract male pit mechanics. He told Men's Magazine FHM, Danica is very quick, but in F1 cars, I can't see it happening due to the G-force in fast corners, and 1 week of the month, you wouldn't want to be on the circuit with them, would you? A girl with big boobs would never be comfortable in the car and the mechanics wouldn't concentrate. Can you imagine strapping her in? Yeah, imagine having to do that, boy. Button's comments come as a new generation of female drivers is starting to break into the world where women have traditionally been confined to the role of brolly dollies, dressed in short skirts, as they shield the drivers from the sun. Jodie Kidd, the supermodel, has swapped the catwalk for the racetrack and now competes professionally. Miss Kidd, who is known as the Queen of Rain for her ability to drive at speed in poor conditions, won her first race in Italy last November. Catherine Legg will next month begin tests to join the Minardi F1 team, and the Irish driver Sarah Kavanagh was offered a place with the Jaguar F1 team in 2004, although the deal collapsed over contractual issues. Yesterday, Kavanagh said that Button made a valid point about the size of women's breasts affecting their ability to fit in the car, but that the rest of his statement was ridiculous. She said, you couldn't get in the car if you had really big breasts, but the rest of what he's saying is just nonsense. It's like Formula One is stuck in some sexist 1970s Playboy vibe. The idea that we can't compete because of our menstrual cycle, come on, it's ancient nonsense. We have women flying F-16s and going to war. Why can't we race a Formula One car? Last night, Emma Parker Bowles, who writes a motoring column for Tatler magazine, also hit back at Button, who is yet to win a Grand Prix. Remember, this is 2005. She said, oh, grow up. If he spent less time staring at grid girls' breasts, he might win more races. There's no reason girls can't succeed in F1. Take that. Absolutely take that and get wrecked. One last story, because that has all been very heavy and I couldn't possibly leave you on that note. You might have heard recently these like horrific headlines about what happened to the W series, which was the all-female racing series. It was meant to be a feeder series into other formulas and supporting, showcasing female motorsport talent. It had its critics, no question, all making valid points. But for what it was worth, it was supposed to promote women into motorsport. It got into, as I understand, a lot of financial problems, and it's basically gone away. But the good news is that it's sort of been replaced by something that's maybe better, called F1 Academy. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in what you can do about some of this stuff that I've been talking about, is start looking at Formula One Academy. But related to that, there's been other good news stories lately. So here's one of them. Jessica Hawkins becomes first female F1 test driver in 5 years. 28-year-old drives 26 laps of Hungaroring for Aston Martin. Getting to drive the AMR 21 has been a dream come true for me, she said. The Aston Martin Formula One team have confirmed that their driver, Ambassador Jessica Hawkins, completed a test for them last week, becoming the first woman to drive a modern F1 car in almost 5 years. The 28-year-old drove 26 laps of the Hungaroring in Budapest last Thursday in the AMR 21, the team's race car from 2021. Hawkins is a former British karting champion, a podium scorer in the W Series, RIP, and has worked as a stunt driver on a James Bond film. Sounds pretty fucking badass. She's currently preparing to support the team's entry into F1's all-female series, the F1 Academy, next season, when all 10 teams will have a representative driver and run a car in their livery. Hawkins prepared for the tests on the Aston Martin simulator, and the team's evolution program director, Robert Sattler, said that she excelled in her run at the Hungaroring. Getting to start, blah, 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 blah. Look, unfortunately, some of the stuff down here is what I want to get to. The all-female W Series folded after 3 seasons in 2022 due to a lack of financial backing, but the F1 Academy, formed and backed by the sport's owners, has declared its target of building a long-term route through the feeder series to bring a woman into F1. It is hosting its debut season this year. However, the Academy's managing director, Susie Wolf, who you might have noticed has come up a whole bunch during my discussion of this, she warned that it could take as long as a decade to bring a female driver into Formula One. Next year, the series will join the Formula One calendar as a support race. So if you haven't heard of Formula Academy before, the idea is all 10 of the Formula One teams will run a car in that series. It will be the Ferrari car, the Mercedes car, the Red Bull car. It'll have the same livery and all female drivers. And the idea is, again, it showcases female motorsport talent. Probably good things, probably bad things to say about that. Number one being, if you've been paying attention, there's this very clear divide. Formula One especially, but motorsport more broadly, is for the guys. So the critics of all female motorsport categories have said, thanks so much for giving us our own category. But it feels a whole lot like you want to pigeonhole us, put us into this box, and that makes it easier to ignore, while also continuing the entrenched mentality that stops us from getting into Formula One in the first place. And you might think, like I read out all those stories. Some of them are from a few years ago. Some of them are from this year. Some of them are from a decade ago. Some of them are from 20 years ago. Why do that? I did that because of that point that Susie Wolf ended on there, saying getting a female into Formula One is still 10 years away. So why is that? It's because of the funnel. It's not because of the funnel. It's because of all the sexist attitudes that everybody has. And that's something that we can address right now. And when she says it'll take 10 years to get a woman into Formula One, it's not because they're not good enough. It's because it's going to take at least that long to address the disadvantage that women have as a result of all the sexist men that are in power. So when we have conversations of that nature now, that's why. When we're trying to push for improvements now, that's why. Because it's going to take a long time. There's a lot of ground to be made up. That's the stream. Nearly an hour. Really, really worked up about those issues. So thanks for listening. I hope it's maybe been fun for you. I don't know. Maybe you were so excited that this happened.
I'm getting a hard on in the middle of the race.
I hope not. That would be inappropriate. If you're Daniel Ricciardo, good luck. You're starting on the second row. I hope that you have a good race. But more broadly, I hope that things are put into perspective for you a little bit. Thanks so much for watching. If you're interested in following everything that we do, here's where you can follow us. We're on Threads at Superlicense F1. You can go to the website superlicense.fm where there's links to everything, links to the podcast, links to the YouTube channel. You can also back us on Patreon for a couple of dollars a month. Support everything that we do and just keep us going. It's not the sort of thing that, like, it's not a huge money earner for us, but that's not really why we do this. It's about just covering the basic costs so that we can just keep doing it. We still have to put in our time. We still have to do all the research and just edit the show and make everything look good. But we really appreciate the support that we get from our patrons. Thanks so much for those who have been watching. See you next time for a new live stream. We try and get back on every race weekend, so we'll see how we go next week. I might be around, but I actually may not be around, so we'll see. But there will be more live streams and obviously more podcasts before the end of the year. So if I don't see you next week, I'll see you very soon. Thanks so much.